Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to emphasize how important the situation is in California right now across the board with our resources, our water supply, our timber, our mining, and our agriculture. Right now, of course, you're probably reading a lot of headlines about the fire situation, how much of our forests and open lands are in big trouble. And you're going to hear that side of the aisle talking all day long about climate change. Like, well, I'd throw back at them. If the climate is changing, what are we actually doing as people on the ground about it besides figuring out who we're going to tax or whose car we're going to take away or whose gas stove we're going to take away? What are we doing practically about making our forests more fireproof or fire safe? What are we doing about our water supply to make sure that there's more water stored so that people, agriculture, and yes, even the environment can use it? What are we doing more to ensure we have a stronger electrical grid? So what is it we have happening? We see that they want to tear out a part of the electrical grid in the form of hydroelectric dams in Northern California, as well as up in Oregon and Washington, et cetera. It's just one after another. Hydroelectric dams provide CO2-free electricity, if you want to worry about the CO2. Now, CO2 only makes up 0.04% of our atmosphere, but they're using it as a weapon in order to force us to change our lifestyles. So let's store more water so we have it for agriculture, so we have it for hydroelectric power, so we have it for all the matter of things that we need water for human use and environmental use. So let's move the ball on that. In my own district, we have a project called the Sites Reservoir that's been talked about for 50 years. It seems to be coming close to fruition of actually getting started to be built, but there's still roadblocks that can be thrown up. There could still be weaponized lawsuits to try and stop the building of Sites Reservoir, which would be 1.5 million more acre-feet of storage for California, as well as its positive flood control benefits when you're pulling that water out of a flooded river system into that reservoir. So why can't we think ahead a little more on these issues with our infrastructure? Agriculture in California is one of the most important components of our food supply for this whole country that you can imagine. We have so much that we grow in California, from the Sacramento Valley to San Joaquin Valley, that many of those crops, 90 to 99% of it, are grown in California. If we don't grow it there, we're going to have to import it, or we have to do without. If we have to import it, then it means it's going to be higher cost, or it's going to be lesser quality, or it will be a not reliable constant source if they want to play trade games against us with it as well. Why don't we produce it in California? We have the water supply. Hundreds of thousands, millions of acre feet even, escape to the sea each year because we're not storing it, we're not trapping it, we're not putting it into groundwater recharge, which would be extremely helpful for the San Joaquin Valley, especially where they've had the ground has actually subsided. It's sinking somewhat. They've pulled a lot of water out of the ground in order to do agricultural activity. But that said, agriculture also means groundwater recharge. If we're flooding those fields, if we're irrigating those fields, it percolates back down in there. Instead, they take more water away, and they want to, away from the farmers, and they want to replace it with, they call it solar farms, which is an insult. Why would you call that a farm? Indeed, we're finding more and more that these massive solar arrays, as well as windmills, can actually change the climate in the area where they are. Think of the concentration, think of the heat sink. We see that in urban areas. The urban heat sink from so much pavement, so much concrete, so many buildings. Yeah, it raises the temperature. So you want to talk about temperature once again. What are you going to do to the San Joaquin Valley, where their idea is to take more and more ag land out and put so-called solar farms in? We need to have our state be much more productive in keeping agriculture going, keeping the jobs going, having a domestic food supply that's reliable. And so with that comes that infrastructure, building more water supply, not tearing out our hydroelectric dams, but actually preserve them, and adding more to our electrical grid. We have the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant that's been in place for 40 plus years. It was almost going to be decommissioned here this year and next year with the 2 different reactors. It bought 5 more years. Well, we need 40 more years for that plant, and we need more plants like that. We have small nuclear plants we can be building more and more around the country to keep our electric grid stable. And right now, when you see the temperatures in California, and a lot of the West perhaps, over 100 degrees, 105, 108, even some other areas are really high, it's going to be really tough on our electrical grid because we don't seem to have the foresight to produce the electricity. So all these things work together for affordability for families just to stay in their homes and run the air conditioner and have a stable food supply that's halfway reasonable in cost. It's a domestic food supply and one that brings jobs to our backyard and the water supply that we all need.
Gentleman, time's
We
expired.
need all the above on this. I yield back.